Hi, I'm Oliver and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. So this is the first review roundup on Deep Cuts. I asked you guys what you prefer, whether you prefer one in-depth review a month of one album that's come out, or would you prefer a massive clusterfuck basically of everything that I've listened to this month and my opinions. So you said yes to that, so that's what this is. This is the January 2017 album review roundup. It's quite a long title. Maybe I'll change the title at some point. And obviously this is the first time I've done this this format, so let me know what your thoughts are on it, give me some constructive criticism, and hopefully we can work together to make this the sort of feature that everyone wants to see. The first album I'm going to talk about is Run the Jewels with Run the Jewels 3. Boy, does this go off like shit off a shovel. I know it's technically not an album that was released in January, but you know, it was actually scheduled for January and the fuckers released it on Christmas Day, which was lovely of them. It was a lovely Christmas present, so I'm going to include it in this roundup. I have to admit, I was a little bit apprehensive to this record. Whilst I do like the first two Run the Jewels records, I failed to see how they were going to be able to pull off the same style a third time round and it not feel overdone or stale in some way. But they both proved me wrong, because this is a clear progression from the other Run the Jewels records. The production here is filthy. I mean, damn filthy in the best possible way. Industrial beats, earth-shaking bass, and some really unusual production flourishes from LP. This album just sonically feels so different to the last two records. It stands apart for me. It has a much more of a presence to it, and one of the things about the first two records was, although the songs were catchy and they were good, I felt that there wasn't much depth to them. Once you'd heard them a couple of times, you really had the songs down. When I first listened to Run the Jewels 3, it took a really long time for me to lock into it, and I think that's a good thing. There's so much more depth to both the sonic layering of the tracks, but also the lyricism as well is a little bit more detailed, a little bit more fiery. It's just got more of a gravitas to it than the first two records. So it came off for me, this whole project came off for me really well. As before, brilliant and witty cutting lyricism from Mike and El, my favourite probably being from Mike. Say hello to the masters on behalf of the classless masses. We showed up ski masks, picks and axes to murder asses. Notice Me Senpai also had me creasing. My favourite tracks were Hey Kids, Boomaye, that Danny Brown feature, Stay Gold, Don't Get Captured, and Thursday in the Danger Room. Mike and El smashed it out of the park with this record. Don't know what was that, smashing it out of the park apparently. And no, it's my favourite Run the Jewels album yet. In other words, insert fire emojis? No, I'm only joking. Brian Eno Reflection. This was the nicest cerebral massage I've had in ages. Whilst this is definitely a minor release from the ambient legend, it's 54 minutes of enjoyable, glacial, reflective atmosphere. The whole record is one single track, and Eno himself describes it as creating a psychological space that encourages internal conversation. What sounds relatively simplistic to the ear is actually quite complex. It was a complex piece of work to make, and Eno described it himself as one of the most complex works he's ever done. He teamed up with a software designer and app creator, Pete Chilvers, to create the piece of software that made this music. So it's sets of complex algorithms that interweave and interlock, and the music changes very slightly as those algorithms are altered. The result of this work is Eno tinkering around with the software for months and months and coming up with what he decided was the most reflective atmosphere within the music. Despite liking this project, I'm actually more excited for the app version that's going to be coming out. You know, this is something that is going to take on this idea of generative music, and because it's not stuck to the specific formats of an MP3 or an LP or a CD, it's going to be able to change as you listen to it, and there'll be very slight, tiny little changes that generate as you listen to the song. So at daytime it's going to sound different to what it does in the evening. That's a very exciting prospect, I think, and the idea that that music will stay with you all day and alter as your day changes. That's exciting, and so it's an enjoyable project, but I am looking forward to listening to it in a little bit more of a unusual form. Flaming Lips, Oczy, Mlody. I don't like Wayne Coyne. Wayne Coyne to me is a washed up, midlife crisis, waste of space, ball bag of a man. I just can't. He is, what's he done that's good since what, 2002? Okay, maybe Embryonic's good, I'll give you that. Look at him, bubble blowing bellend. Oh, look at me, everything's so psychedelic, man. I wear glitter, oh, it's so cool. You Miley Cyrus friend shagging, grammar bothering twat. Yes, grammar bothering. This isn't the correct use of exclamation points, Wayne. Oh yeah, they released an album this month. I didn't like it. The XX, I See You. So this record kind of blindsided me, to be honest. After hearing the singles On Hold and Say Something, I wasn't really looking forward to the album that much. The XX are a band that have unfailingly stuck to their guns since day one, and by the time that Coexist, their second LP, rolled around, their bare minimalist songwriting was a little bit grating to me. It felt like none of the tracks on that record ever really get going. There's just nothing that memorable on there, apart from maybe Angels, is that the track? I can't remember. That's how little I listened to the album. And even their debut albums, with repeated listens, it's lost its power for me. Well, I have to say, the inclusion of sampling and a more varied sonic palette makes I See You an urgent, intimate and glittering record. It doesn't betray that minimalist approach that they've always had on their previous two albums, but it just adds a lot more depth to it. Those two tracks they released before the record came out, on their own they felt a little bit lackluster, but within the context of the album, everything just fits together so well. You can really hear the band have carefully constructed this album, and they're straddling the line between their original sound and then this new expansive sound that really opens up the band. There are so many gems on this record. Violent Noise with its echoey, fluttering sample and Oliver Sim's gentle vocals. Performance is a highlight. Replica is beautiful. I Dare You. Basically, the album's brilliant. I really like it. Bonobo Migration. I had high hopes from this record coming from an artist who released Black Sands in 2010, which is an absolute masterpiece. Bonobo, pseudonym for musician and producer Simon Green, made his name in the music world from a very clever blend of electronica and trip hop. And the reason Black Sands is such a masterpiece and such a triumph is because of its probing nature. It took influences from all around the world, different musical styles and appreciations, and created something that's very engaging. It genuinely stands up there with electronic music pariahs like Fortet and Boards of Canada. This is where Migration falls flat for me. There ain't no bloody migrating. It just stands there, sort of content in its surface level beauty, and it doesn't strive for anything more than that. It all begins promisingly in the opening title track, a gentle, atmospheric with light tinkling piano and distant vocals that are swirling and seem to get lost in the ambience. And second track, Break Apart, is actually very effective with a very well written vocal part from guest vocalist Rye. Actually, it reminds me a lot of the XX record because it's really catchy song. Soon after that, the album just drops into fairly forgettable territory. That's the thing, I can't really closely analyse this album because even though I listened to it 5 or 6 times, nothing really stuck in my head other than the first 2 tracks. It's pretty to listen to, but it doesn't strive for anything more like Bonobo's other albums. And it's a shame really, because it just ends up falling flat, and there's very little replay value in this album for me personally. Wiley Godfather. For those of you that aren't aware of Wiley, he's the man largely responsible for the creation of grime music, which is a genre of aggressive garage stemming from London. He lived in Bow in East London, and it's a style of music that's become increasingly popular. It's become emblematic of British hip-hop over the years, and the last few years has seen a massive resurgence. You know, someone like Drake has become an honorary member of BBK, which is Boy Better Know, which is one of the big grime collectives. So it's become more popular, but it's all started with Wiley back in the early 2000s. If you don't know about grime and you do want a primer, look out for my 5 albums to get you into grime, which I'm probably going to do in the next 4 weeks or so. Anyway, not long ago, Wiley tweeted out saying that he didn't see that there was any point in him releasing another album. You know, his time was long ago. The genre is now led by younger people like Skepta, and I guess he didn't think that there was any room for the Godfather of the genre. See what I did there? Godfather. That's the title of the album. Clever. Thankfully, he changed his mind and he released Godfather, a sharp, dexterous, seething record that is proud of its roots. Wiley has said this will be his final album. In his own words, he's getting too old for this shit. And if this is his goodbye, then what a farewell it is. It's a fiery album. It really brings across so many features from across the grime scene, and all of that is interwoven with his aggressive beats, his seething lyricism. There's so much anger in this still. Like, Wiley's approaching, I think he's in his early 40s now, or he's just approached 40, but he's still got that energy that he had when he was younger, and he was, you know, carving out this new sound for a scene that hadn't yet been created. Artists like Devlin, JME, J2K, Skepta, Chip, they are among the people representing the best of the genre on this. And it's nice the way the album works. It feels like they're all there celebrating the talents and the skill of the man who started it all. Second track, Bring Them All, Holy Grime, is a hard-hitting classic. It's got Wiley and Devlin furiously trading bars. It's such an explosive song. Bang has this paranoid string sample that works so well alongside fuzzed bass, and Wiley spitting alongside the guest vocalist Gets. Elsewhere, You Were Always Part 2 is a 90s R&B odyssey. Tongue-in-cheek, I think, and Name Brand is a track that's catchy as hell. I can imagine that being played on the radio everywhere. This album is brilliant. If you want an intro to grime, this is a really great place to start. Japandroids, Near to the Wild Heart of Life. I really wanted to like this record as much as I do their previous album, 2012 Celebration Rock. There's been something about Japandroids that I've adored ever since I heard their first album in 2009, Post Nothing. And it's that spirit of Springsteen coupled with the passion and fire of being young. It's life-affirming. They create songs that are endlessly sing-alongable, and they have this nostalgia to them. And for me, this album, Near to the Wild Heart of Life, just doesn't quite reach those emotions. Don't get me wrong, it's a good album, and I can appreciate what Brian King and David Prowse are doing with this album. They want to create something that's more considered and more matured, but in doing so they lose out on some of that insistent urgency that Celebration Rock and Post Nothing had. North, East, South, West is a great example of this change in tact. They have this track that has a real anthemic chorus to it, but they never take advantage of that songwriting through the production or the performance. It feels like the intention there was to hold back, but it actually didn't do the song any real favors in the end. Elsewhere on the album, this change of tact actually works with 7-minute track Arc of Bar. It has these glittering keyboard parts and soaring vocals. The fact they take more time with it actually really works. No Known Drink or Drug is a good track, and it's another track that registers this shift in tone for the band. It's a relatively simplistic track instrumentally, but King's vocals are flattened. They sound like they're coming out of a radio or something, and Prowse's backing vocals are very forlorn, and there's just this real melancholic feeling that comes through the track that you don't really get on the other albums quite so much. So yeah, good album, definitely worth checking out. Although, if you've never heard Celebration Rock before, you need to go and listen to that album, like right now. Pause the video and go and listen to it. I won't even be mad. William Basinski, A Shadow in Time. Here's a different kind of ambient music to Brian Eno's Reflection. This is an album that altogether requires or commands a very different listening experience. It's less of a reflective one and more of a confrontational one. Basinski's new project is the kind of ambient music that bores its way into you. It insists on having your attention despite being deeply repetitious, but that is the strength of the music. There are two halves to the record, the first being the piece A Shadow in Time. This piece is stunning, a true sonic journey of sounds and patterns that works its way into the deep recesses of your mind, only a couple of minutes into its 23-minute running time. And if you listen to this all the way through, start to finish with headphones on, you will find it to be quite a transformative experience, I think. It really does take you away to another place. It does what a lot of very good ambient music does. It's incredible. It's very difficult to describe the power of this track, from the glacial high notes of the opening that make way for this deep, earth-shaking bass that deteriorates not unlike Basinski's own Disintegration loops, and then the ending with the melancholic piano where the ominous scape just fades away. It's a beautiful track, and it needs to be experienced on headphones. The second half, For David Robert Jones, is Basinski's own tribute to David Bowie, and the whole thing is made of orchestral loops. And halfway through the track, he introduces this really wistful, forlorn saxophone sample, which he himself said was a tribute to Bowie's work on albums like Low, specifically the track Subterraneans. So a really beautiful tribute. It's unorthodox. No one's singing any David Bowie songs, so that's good. It works as a very nice tribute, and it's lovely to see a musician paying tribute to a fellow musician in that way. It's a beautiful track and a very nice project, a really good album. I like it, and you should go and listen to it. Rose, Elinor, Dougall, Stellular. Rose Elinor Dougall is a busy creator. She used to be part of the Pipettes before she moved on and became part of Mark Ronson's touring band. And I think she even worked with the Royal Ballet last year. So yeah, she's a very busy person. It's been almost 7 years since her last solo record, and Stellular is a satisfying collision of dream pop, disco and indie sensibility. It has a lot of replay value, and I know that I'm going to be listening to it for a long time. One thing that really strikes me about the album is Rose's vocals. Her voice has this sophisticated classicism to it that really elevates the songwriting on the album, and it also gives the tracks this timeless quality. That's not to say the songwriting needs elevating though. The arrangements here are dense and clever, really detailed. You can tell that Rose is a very good songwriter. She has a real knack for writing not only catchy, memorable hooks and melodies, but also light-footed flourishes in the instrumentation. It makes the whole thing very satisfying, and it's the reason for that need for repeated listens. It really rewards you. Title track Stellular is one of the best tracks here. It's an up-tempo, synth-drenched masterpiece with disco bass and drums, so satisfying to listen to. Track All at Once is a disco jam with these abrasive, hopping synths, eventually joined by a guitar part that's so gorgeously written. Everything on here is so accomplished. A great album, and I'm really excited to see what she does next. Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes, Modern Ruin. Oh, Frank, what happened to you? For those of you that didn't know, Frank Carter used to front the British hardcore punk band Gallows, and they would come to gigs. Frank would split his head open, bleed everywhere, screaming, invite people to punch him in the face, and depending on what camp you're in or perhaps how old you were at the time, that was either brilliantly explosive or kind of irritating. And me being about 15 at the time, I found it brilliantly explosive. I used to go to quite a lot of Gallows gigs, and actually Frank even punched me in the face once at a gig. I mean, not hard, it was a fairly, more of a light tap, I suppose, with his fist. Since he left Gallows, he formed the band Pure Love, which was kind of boring, bland, lowest common denominator, meat and potatoes rock. And then he created the band Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes, which is kind of boring, bland, lowest common denominator, meat and potatoes rock. This record is just so boring. I listened to it 3 or 4 times, nothing stuck in my head. It's so paint by numbers, meaty guitar riffs, just nothing to sink your teeth into. I know I just used the word meaty and then sink your teeth, so you think that there was something to sink your teeth into. Bad wording on my part. There is nothing here to sink your teeth into. It's so bland. It's a shame, because love them or loathe them, at least Gallows was an exciting prospect. You know you were going to turn up and see something and you know, completely separate from their live gigs. Gallows, it was hardcore punk. It was really explosive, and at least it was divisive. You either loved it or you hated it. And with this, you're just like, what? It doesn't sound like anything. It's just boring. I could probably hear it on the radio and I wouldn't recognize it. You know, it's just so boring. He might be more emotionally stable these days, but the music's definitely suffered. So yeah, I don't think I'd bother with this. That's it. That's my collection of albums that I listened to in January 2017. I know there's a few that I've missed out, because there's a few I haven't had time to listen to. I'm so busy, I can't listen to every single release, but these are the ones that I took time out to listen to. Yeah, let me know what your thoughts were. What do you think of these albums? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I bet some of you disagree. I bet you disagree about Flaming Lips, don't you? I'm waiting for those comments. If there's any albums that you listened to in January that I didn't talk about, then let the community know. Let me know what your thoughts are on them. Follow me on Twitter at DeepCutsTweets if you want to chat or want to talk about anything. And I will see you with Swans, a guide to Swans. It's finally going to come. So I'll see you next week with a guide to Swans. See you later.